Welcome to the Lumenverse. If you find solace in scary stories to soothe your mind or find pleasure in listening silently in the background, please consider subscribing and engaging by liking the video. We start our first tale with a home that perhaps should not exist. There is a secluded road in the older section of town that is rarely traversed. It comes to an end at a narrow, damaged lane shrouded in hedges and mist. Continuing onward, one would encounter a house which appears not to be abandoned, but rather strangely devoid of any signs of life. The windows are meticulously tidy, and the curtains freshly hung, but there is never any hint of a sound coming from within. No footsteps shuffling, no voices in conversation, not even the faint hum of a refrigerator running. The townsfolk claim that the house awaits. On chilly, windless nights, a soft glow emanates from the upstairs window. If one dares to step inside, they'll find rooms fully furnished, giving the impression that someone has just departed. A cup of tea still warm on the table, and a book with a bookmark marking an unfinished sentence. Always there is a chair removed from the table, as if someone was just seated there moments ago. Rumors circulate that if one sits in this chair, patiently awaiting in the silence, they'll perceive breathing other than their own. In the remote countryside, a forgotten railway line stands forsaken. The tracks are corroded, and weeds pierce through the slats. Yet on foggy evenings, the train still approaches. It is always just beyond the midnight hour when you hear its distant sounds, the low, steady chuff, the shrill squealing of invisible wheels, the dim glow of a headlamp penetrating the haze. As the train glides past, its progression is unhurried enough for you to observe the passengers aboard. The people aboard the train appear slightly awry. Their pale eyes and ashen skin, coupled with their mouths fixed in frozen mid-speech, suggest that the words they were speaking have been snatched away from them long ago. The passengers rotate their heads to regard the observer as the train glides past, their pallid faces pressed against the windows. Locals whisper that the train holds those who vanished in accidents that occurred on the line, thus eternally destined to traverse the route in search of a station that never materializes. Hidden within an antiquated boarding school, there existed a room situated on the top floor that educators adamantly avoided discussing. This space was concealed behind the shelves of the library, concealed from view unless one was keenly in the know. The children referred to this enigmatic entity as the room with no door. During the hushed hours of the night, they would discern scraping sounds from beyond the wall or the subtle rustling of pages. A peculiar occurrence. Given that the library was securely locked, Thomas declared that he has discovered the entryway through a loose panel leading to a narrow passage. The day following, Thomas vanished. His bed remained warm and his shoes rest gently by his bed, suggesting the sudden nature of his departure. Subsequent weeks saw the discovery of an old leather-bound book with faded ink adorning its cover on a library shelf. On its first page, hastily inscribed were the words, "I found the door. Do not open it." A tranquil intersection rests quietly within the downtown district, its ambiance enhanced by a solitary street lamp that shines in the night. A man consistently takes up residence beneath it, clad in a dark suit and bowler hat, his face perpetually veiled in shadow. Should one pass him without pause, he remains stationary, calmly tracking their movement with his gaze. However, if one halts and engages in eye contact, the street lamp above will flicker momentarily before stabilizing again. Upon subsequent observation, one would discover oneself standing amidst an abandoned street, with boarded-up houses and smattered window panes. Within an aged coastal inn, stories persist of a soft lullaby that graces the night, gently weaving through the air, its sound barely perceptible. Curiously, the melody never originates from beyond the building. Rather, it emanates from within the very walls. Those fortunate enough to hear it describe the tune as lulling, bringing a sense of comfort initially. However, as the melody progresses, the notes elongate, contorting and straining, suggesting a struggle or perhaps a choke. Within the vicinity of a settlement, there resides a forest that is shunned after nightfall. The paths within the woodland are perplexingly convoluted. Even with the aid of a compass, navigation proves to be a challenge. On rare occasions, a glimmer of light filters through the trees, a lantern swinging gracefully in the breeze, casting a warm, golden glow. Whoever endeavors to pursue this illumination discovers that it remains perpetually just beyond their reach, consistently ahead, yet never too far away to glimpse. Isolated from town, beyond farmlands and the tranquil bends of a venerable river, rests a hill with grass that exhibits a subtle distinction in shade. Despite its gentle incline, making the ascent relatively easy on the body, a peculiarity exists atop the hill. The wind whispers gently through the blades of the tall grass. Concealed on the far side of the incline, an enigmatic door appears, devoid of any attached structure or building. A weathered wooden frame supports a darkened oak door, its paint peeling, the metallic handle afflicted by rust. Despite its solid structure, the door mysteriously lacks visible hinges. If one were to move behind it, no hint of its presence would be detected. Tales persist that the door has graced this land for over a century, inciting local children to engage in dares, challenging each other to touch its handle. Some describe it as cold to the touch, independent of the heat. Others claim it emits a rhythm akin to a pulsing heartbeat. Countless attempts have been made. Hammers bounced off its surface without leaving a mark, and axes failed to even dent the unyielding wood. A determined farmer once secured a rope to the handle, intending to pry it open using the strength of his horse. But the rope frayed, and he bore rope-burn scars on his hands for the rest of his days. Those walking along the old river road at night occasionally spot a faint, bluish light seeping from beneath the door. The light, which vanishes if one draws nearer, is accompanied by an ephemeral sound, a soft whispered or scratching reverberation. Throughout her childhood, Sarah frequently woke up in the dead of night, not due to nightmares but because of an unnerving sense of being observed. She would remain motionless, with her eyes firmly closed, listening intently. Her room was always tranquil, devoid of any audible disturbance. Her parents slept peacefully down the hall, while the only sound heard was the faint ticking of the clock that hung on the wall. Yet every single time, without exception, Sarah would open her eyes, only to see a shadowy figure standing nearby. A towering silhouette stood in the corner of Sarah's room, a familiar constant that never altered its position. Its stillness initially misled her, making her presume it was merely her coat hanging from the chair. However, the figure's height exceeded that of the chair, and its head was inclined towards her. Although she could not discern its face, she was certain of its gaze fixed upon her. Oddly enough, fear evaded her. Rather, a sense of consolation enveloped her in its presence. The enigmatic figure persisted, making its nightly appearances night after night. When Sarah turned 12, the family relocated to a new abode. The first night there, she awakened in the unfamiliar surroundings, but, consistent with the past, the same tall shadow loomed in the corner, its head tilted and gaze fixed on her. Now living in a distant city, Sarah occasionally awakes in the night, finding herself reassured by an unnamed presence, a constant, steadfast guardian in the corner of her room. When Michael settled into his new abode, he found nearly everything to his liking. The creaking wooden floors, the towering windows, and the way the gentle afternoon light streamed in, infusing the space with a cozy atmosphere. Yet there was a single aspect he disliked about the residence: the attic. The attic boasted a cramped and confined ambiance, with low beams that forced one to stoop, and layers of dust covering everything. In the far corner rested an antique trunk, secured by a padlock that defied all attempts to open it. Every night, as darkness blanketed the landscape, Michael's peaceful slumber was shattered. The unmistakable sound of footsteps resonated from the attic directly above his bed, a slow creak of boards punctuated by a deliberate pacing rhythm. Initially, Michael dismissed these disturbances as the natural creaks of an aged abode, attributing them to the settling of woodwork. However, the regular pattern of the noises, persisting with unwavering consistency, defied the notion of mere chance. Armed with resolve, Michael snatched a flashlight and scaled the narrow ladder to the attic. The dense air enveloped him, and his flashlight beam pierced through the dust. Then, the footsteps began once more, originating from just before him, yet the wooden boards remained stationary. To his astonishment, no one was visible. Since that night, Michael has refrained from venturing into the attic. However, the footsteps persist, their presence manifesting at varying distances, sometimes close, other times eerily above him, as though they were listening intently. Nestled within a tranquil neighborhood, a vacant house stands, its solitary upstairs window facing the street. Over the course of years, the residence has remained uninhabited, and everyone in the region is privy to this knowledge. Yet, there lingers an inexplicable occurrence. Individuals have witnessed a sight that defies the ordinary. An elderly woman, thin with silvery hair gathered in a careless bun, standing within the window as dusk descends, silently gazing down upon the street. On certain occasions, The elderly woman appears fleetingly, a brief glimpse, and she vanishes. Yet, on rare occasions she lingers longer, causing passers-by to unwittingly alter their paths, crossing the street without conscious intent. A daring teenager, driven by curiosity, scaled the fence and ventured closer to the window. Despite the grime-covered glass, she could discern the old woman clearly on the opposite side. Intriguingly, the elderly woman's gaze tracked her movements, maintaining eye contact with the inquisitive teen. The girl cautiously approached the porch, but upon glancing upward, she discovered that the window was vacant. Despite her efforts to catch a glimpse of the elderly woman again, her attempts proved futile. Ever since that eerie encounter, a peculiar inclination takes hold whenever passers-by find themselves strolling through the neighborhood at dusk. Should they inadvertently glance upward and behold the elderly woman in the window, a curious urge to wave overcomes them. And, on rare occasions, the old woman acknowledges their gesture with a silent wave of her own. A lonely roadside motel named Valley Rest stands along a specific route through the mountains. It is easily distinguishable thanks to its flickering neon sign. A weary traveler named Aaron once found himself stranded during a snowstorm, compelling him to seek refuge at the motel. Upon his arrival, an exhausted receptionist handed over a brass key, cautioning him in a hushed tone. Please don't open the curtains. Despite his initial reservations, the room proved snug and comfortable. Aaron noticed the curtains were unusually dense, obstructing any hint of external illumination. For a time, he cast aside the receptionist's warning. As midnight approached, an incessant tapping noise echoed against the window pane, akin to fingertips persistently rapping on the glass. The sound progressively grew more forceful, demanding attention. Overwhelmed by curiosity, Aaron cautiously drew back the curtain, only to be met with a jarring sight. Instead of the expected view of the parking lot flanked by looming mountains, the curtains revealed an utterly empty black void. Amid the abyss, something seemed to gaze back, its presence both unsettling and enigmatic. When dawn arrived, the front desk clerk expressed her gratitude for his patronage, extending a receipt. However, when Aaron returned to the same location the subsequent year, his attempt was in vain. All that remained was a desolate stretch of barren road, devoid of any trace of the once-standing Valley Rest Motel. Hollow Road, once a popular, into disrepair. Cracks mar the road's surface, and withered trees line the way. Halfway down, an ancient phone booth, featuring a rotary phone and foldable door, beckons. Local lore holds that the phone within hasn't been operational for ages. Nonetheless, there persists an inexplicable occurrence. On rare occasions, the phone rings. Late one evening, a man named Peter ventured down the desolate hollow road. Caught off guard by the unexpected ringing, he instinctively lifted the receiver. Initially, the line filled with static before a soft, barely human voice whispered pleadingly, "Help me get out." Frightened by the disturbing encounter, Peter promptly ended the call, hastening his steps. Unsettlingly, the phone rang incessantly once more, but, thankfully, its clamor gradually dissipated as distance grew between him and the booth. Subsequent investigations unveiled a chilling revelation. The final authentic user of the phone booth was a missing hiker. An ancient boarding school harbors a mysterious room located deep within its third-floor hallway. The door, marked by warped wood and chipped paint, is perpetually secured. All newcomers are rigorously warned, never enter that room. Curiosity eventually drove a group of rebellious friends to undertake a late-night stealth mission to the room's entrance. After relentless fiddling with the lock, it surrendered, and the door creaked open into a musty chamber, revealing a solitary bed adorned with an undisturbed blanket and a rocking chair gently swaying. After venturing into the eerie chamber, the group realized that the hallway outside the room had undergone an inexplicable transformation. The ambience was altered. The lighting was dimmer, the floor warped in an unnatural manner, and hushed whispers echoed from every direction. As panic set in, they hastily retreated back into the room, closing the door behind them. Upon reopening it, the expected normalcy of their usual hallway was restored, a relief that came with an unsettling realization. Since that encounter, none of them dared to disclose the experience with others, but occasionally, during the quietest hours, they could discern faint knocking sounds emanating from beyond. Tucked away in a quaint farming town lies an antiquated wooden bridge, seemingly innocuous during daylight hours, adorned with worn-out planks, rusty railings, and a babbling creek beneath it. As night blankets the area, the bridge undergoes a mysterious transformation. One adventurous young man named Thomas dared to cross the span beyond midnight, accepting a challenge. Initially, the bridge seemed routine, consistent with his frequent crossings. However, as time ticked away, a chilling temperature enveloped the area, accompanied by a sudden calm in the usually rippling creek water. With trepidation, Thomas ventured across the seemingly interminable bridge. At the far end, pale, motionless figures materialized along the tree line, their gaze fixated upon him. The uncanny encounter prompted Thomas to make a swift retreat, refusing to risk a glimpse back. Upon reaching the conclusion of the bridge, the nocturnal ambiance reverted to normalcy. However, an unusual discovery awaited him the following morning. His shoes remained moist, and to his astonishment, the creek he had crossed lay completely dry, defying logic. Within the cozy confines of a quaint second-hand bookstore, nestled between two bustling streets, there existed a distinctive shelf that constantly harbored a layer of dust. The owner maintained that it had endured for the entirety of her tenure there. The peculiar assortment of books showcased was marked by the absence of titles or author names. The covers were simply adorned with cracked leather. Upon loitering too long in this enigmatic space, certain customers would occasionally discern a whispered sound, as if the very books were seeking to deliver a message. The words themselves remained elusive, but an unmistakable urgency punctuated each utterance. Claire, a woman with a penchant for literary exploration, acquired one of the cryptic books from the enigmatic shelf. That evening, her sleep was consumed by a vivid dream, transporting her to the very confines of the bookstore, where an eerie candlelit illumination cast long shadows throughout the room. Once more, the whispered plea echoed, "Put it back before it finds you." Awakening with a start, Claire found the once blank book splayed open atop her chest, and etched on the page, a chilling proclamation emerged. Too late now. Many vintage homes conceal vacant spaces that remain untouched for years, serving as makeshift storage areas for superfluous belongings. Within this abode, a particular room harbored two motionless beds draped in sheets. During one summer, the homeowners welcomed a niece to stay, designating the unused space for her accommodations. That very evening, the girl directed a query towards her aunt, posing the unexpected question, "Who is occupying the second bed?" As the aunt listened to the girl's uncanny account, her face drained of color. She dismissed the observation, attributing it to a mere dream. Yet, each ensuing night, the enigmatic vision persisted. The looming silhouette concealed beneath the sheets, chest steadily rising and falling. Upon the family's eventual relocation, uncovering the untouched bed, a disturbing discovery awaited. The mattress, once concealed under sheets, revealed an unnerving truth. Its fibers were saturated with dampness, bearing the unmistakable imprint of a body that had lain there for an unfathomable duration. Within the sprawling cityscape, a specific bus route operates extended hours, with the drivers having been forewarned about a local urban legend known as the last stop phenomenon. According to the tale, late at night, a lone individual is said to be waiting at a deserted stop long after midnight. The mysterious figure is notably pale, garbed in antiquated attire that defies modern fashion, and notably silent throughout the whole experience. The passenger will then request to be taken to a street that the driver has never heard of before. An unsuspecting driver, having recently acquired the role, unwittingly engaged in the fateful pickup, transporting an enigmatic figure who perfectly embodied the last stop legend. Throughout the journey, a profound silence prevailed, punctuated only when the bus rolled to a halt at the end of the route. The old man graciously departed, leaving the driver alone in the empty bus. A glance in the rearview mirror revealed an abandoned field bathed in moonlight, devoid of any street. Upon a rearward glance, the driver was taken aback to discover the old man still seated in the back row. Amidst a tranquil countryside, a charming inn boasted a hallway adorned with 9 doors, as the proprietors informed their guests. Yet, during the hushed quietude of early morning, a perplexing occurrence would occasionally unfold. Driven by curiosity, a determined traveler dared to explore. Pushing open the enigmatic 10th door, they found themselves within a small, dimly lit chamber, distinguished by a solitary rocking chair swaying ceaselessly. Drawn by a peculiar impulse, he cautiously entered, only to find the door mysteriously closing behind him. Turning around, he discovered that curiously vanished, leaving only the incessant creak of the rocking chair and an eerie whisper soliciting his name. Awakening the following morning in his bed at the inn, he remained uncertain whether the encounter was indeed a dream. As he inspected the hallway, He confirmed the presence of only 9 doors and the solitary rocking chair stationed right outside his room. In the pre-streaming and smartphone era, late-night television was a form of entertainment, punctuated by static that filled the screen once channels went off air. Stories circulated among various individuals regarding whispers that could be detected within the white noise, a claim that piqued the curiosity of a young boy named Daniel. Daniel decided to test the urban legend himself, leaning in close to the screen, enduring the flickering light that strained his eyes. Initially, the static was simply unintelligible noise. However, a voice soon emerged, calling out softly and patiently, beckoning him closer. Later, Daniel's parents discovered him asleep on the floor, still in front of the TV, which continued emitting static. But in the background, an eerie sound emerged. Daniel's own voice, faint yet unmistakable, called out from within the hiss. An estate sale, a woman encountered a substantial, leather-bound photograph album, adorned with black and white images of unfamiliar faces, with no accompanying names or dates. Captivated by its peculiar nature, she acquired the album, considering it a curious find. That evening, she indulged in an exploration of the album just before retiring to bed. Halfway through, she was confronted with an unsettling revelation. A photograph depicting her lying asleep in her own bed, captured in black and white. Overwhelmed by the uncanny coincidence, she hesitantly turned the page. She was met with another image of herself, this time captured with greater clarity and closer. As she reached the final page, a chilling realization dawned. The background unmistakably resembling her own bedroom. In the last photograph, she sat awake in her bed, staring directly at the camera. Tales circulated among fishermen who patrolled the coastline of a haunting figure that roamed the shoreline at night. Wielding a muted lantern, it was whispered that this specter only materialized during dense fog, and those who pursued it would lose their bearings and never find their path back to safety. A sailor named Paul, skeptical of such stories, once returned home late at night. Suddenly, he noticed the faint glow of a lamp in the distance, seemingly beckoning him forward. The light remained just out of reach, maintaining a consistent distance from him, and slowly traversing the rocky terrain. Intrigued and perplexed, Paul cautiously drew closer to the enigmatic figure only to notice something bizarre. The figure's feet seemed to hover just above the rocky terrain, as if defying gravity. As he watched, the feet swayed gently without making contact with the moist stones below. Curiously, the following morning brought a baffling discovery. Paul's boots were indeed found scattered across the rugged landscape, yet the local tide charts indicated no water in that area during the night. As Emily settled into her new abode, she became acutely aware of a ghostly handprint adorning her bathroom mirror. Day after day she diligently wiped it clean, but every morning it reappeared without fail, often at varying heights, as if tracking a steady ascent. On one particular evening, following a relaxing hot shower, the mirror fogged over completely. To her horror, the handprint emerged once more, imprinted on the opposite side of the glass, as if pressed from within the very reflection itself. Rooted in a tranquil rural setting, a man secluded himself within the confines of a modest abode. He imposed upon himself a single steadfast rule: never, under any circumstances, answer the door if a knock reverberated after the clock struck 12. During one fateful night, at precisely 12:03, the man was abruptly jolted from his tranquility by the unmistakable sound of 3 resonant knocks. The silence that followed was even more haunting than the initial disturbance. Night after night, the unsettling pattern repeated. The man endured the haunting sound of 3 knocks followed by a momentary silence, and then it resumed the next night. On the eve of his 4th night, curiosity eventually surpassed his fear, driving him to cautiously open the door. To his puzzled disappointment, there was nothing on the other side. However, a chilling epiphany followed. From within the neighboring forest, the distinct sound of 3 deliberate knocks echoed, accompanied by the unsettling sound of something colossal, steadily moving in his direction. As the storyteller's words wove to a close, a hushed stillness enveloped the gathering. The vivid imagery in their tales lingered like a spectral presence in the tranquil air, awaiting for the next curious soul to delve into the haunting secrets locked within the pages. Rest now, the storyteller continued, their voice lowering to a mere whisper. And don't be surprised if you dream of doors that shouldn't be there or hear whispers in the static, or see the soft glow of a lantern in the fog.